and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go through board reports, committee updates. Mrs. O'Toole, if you would please update us for the audit committee and board policy committee.
I have no report for the audit committee this evening. And policy committee, I would just say the policies that the policy committee recommended for changes are on tonight's agenda for the second reading and adoption.
Okay.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And Mrs. Garvey is absent this evening, so we'll skip business advisory committee and capital planning unless anybody knows.
Well, I know she would like to note that capital planning has a meeting Tuesday, September 28th at 4:30.
True. Good point. Anything else? Okay. Oh, sorry. And also board finance committee, record retention. We actually have a meeting coming up September 28th at 4 p.m. if you're so inclined. Next up is a superintendent's report. So I will turn over the floor to Dr. Penzarski.
Thank you. We haven't had a chance to just have an update. And I think that a lot of things have changed in the last month. And so what I hope to do tonight was just to have kind of like what we had done before, where I'll just share information informally. And then if you have any questions or you have any input, I'd be happy to answer. So right now we have masking as a mandate grades K through 6. Currently 7, 12 and preschool is strongly recommended. And so I've been calling it kind of my task force, but our COVID team meets often and we look at all kinds of data and points. So everything that I'm going to share with you tonight is available on the website. So if you go to the Chagrin Falls website and you hit the COVID dashboard, you can find any of this information. It should be up to date. So here's what we know. We know that we have 1 positive active student case, and we have 0 positive active staff cases right now. We have 8 total students in quarantine, and that's across the whole district. We've had 12 positive student cases since August 23rd, and 3 positive staff cases since August 23rd. We have had 37 students who were quarantined because of close contact and 3 staff members who were quarantined because of close contact, again, since August 23rd, since everything started to be documented. The other thing that we know, and we've talked about, it's the reason that I didn't present the school reopening plan in July, was that the quarantine rules for us will be impacted by House Bill 244. When I say us, I mean public schools. It's not just Chagrin Falls. And so on October 13th, that's when that House bill goes into effect. And once that bill goes into effect, we will not be able to differentiate between vaccinated and unvaccinated status, except for those people who are ages 16 and up and have received the Pfizer vaccine. And again, this is if nothing else changes. And remember, the reason that that age group is impacted is because the FDA has approved Pfizer for 16 and up. Our goal throughout this whole process has been to keep our kids in school 5 days a week and also to keep them as safe as possible. Obviously, if you look at just the data, and we understand that our data is only as good as it's reported, so there's limitations, but our protocols and what we're doing is currently seems or appears to be doing okay compared to some other districts. But if we follow the current ODH classroom exposure quarantine flow chart, that's a big mouthful, but it was one of the things that I had up on the screen. Again, it's available through links on our website. Currently, we're able to allow students who are vaccinated. So remember, that's basically 12 and up and not symptomatic to continue to attend school. So since students under the age of 12 were not eligible for the vaccine, that's why we put universal masking at K-6 in place. So let me just give you an example. Since August 23rd, 2021, we've had 46 close contacts identified in grades 7 through 12. Now, the reason I'm only talking about 7 through 12 is because 7 through 12 is strongly recommended, right? Our K-6 kids that were in close contact all were masked. And if you're masked, you don't have to quarantine. If you're not symptomatic, there's other little, I'm giving you a very brief, read the flow chart for all the pieces. But of those 46 students in grades 7 through 12, 31 students were vaccinated. And so as a result, they were not quarantined. So we only had 15 students quarantined because we were able to take into account their vaccination status. But on October 13th, if they're under the age of 16, if it's not under that FDA approval, we won't be able to do that. And remember that masking, universal masking, is a way that if you're not symptomatic and you're wearing a mask and you're in close contact, we don't have to quarantine you. And so that's, or exclude you, however you want to look at it. But that's why most districts around us have gone to a universal masking or went with a universal masking policy. So remember, House Bill 244, and I'm going to say this a lot, goes into effect October 13th. And so we've talked about the Pfizer vaccine. So let me just give you some updates on data and things that the team has been considering and thinking about. So all school districts that touch Chagrin Falls have a universal masking policy. And the schools we looked at were West Geauga, Orange, Kenston, and Solon. I know some of those schools started like we did, and then they had the spike in numbers, and they wanted to keep their kids in school, so they had made those transitions. Some started school that way. So we have a strong recommendation from the governor. I think that happened last week, where he asked schools to mask. And we also had an advisory from Cuyahoga County for universal masking indoors in schools. Over the last month, we have a letter from Ohio Children's Hospital Association urging universal masking in schools. There's a new report out about children and how they're impacted by the new variant that was put out by the American Academy of Pediatrics and Children's Hospital Association. And if we're just looking at the metric, and that's that 2-week metric that they put out for Ohio, in the last month, Ohio has gone from 259 cases per 100,000 to 683 cases per 100,000.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. So in the last month, we've gone as a state, 259 cases per 100,000 to 683 cases per 100,000. So here's kind of what the team is thinking. Preschool really just started for us recently, and they have no means to be exempt if they're in close contact because there's no vaccine available for a preschooler. And we know that all preschoolers can't wear a mask. That's why we have a mask exemption. And so we're strongly considering requiring masking for the preschool age group. And then that would align with everything in Gurney and what they're doing. Unless something changes on October 13th, we're going to have to pivot. I mean, because we're not going to have an option because there's no way for us to be putting out that number of students when there's a close contact, because we won't be able to use vaccination status. That group that we're able to use vaccination status for will shrink. So remember, 16 or older and you had to have Pfizer. So just think about those things. Anyone whose ages 12 to 15, or people 18 and older who got Moderna or Johnson & Johnson vaccine would not be eligible for that amended quarantine, which is that flow chart. If that group of people have a mask, they would be able to be exempt. So there's a lot of factors and a lot of recommendations, and we still have 2 more meetings tomorrow with groups of people. So just know that we talked to our administrators, we talked to various subgroups to make sure that we have, what are you seeing? What are the trends that are going on? And so we'll have some more discussion tomorrow, but also know that whatever decision that we make, we're going to make the best decision we can, but we're also going to continue to monitor. So it's not a final decision. If we can pivot back, we will. But I just felt like we hadn't had a talk about anything recent for a month at least. And I felt like I needed to share what our conversations have been at the table and maybe answer any questions tonight that you might have, or if you want to share anything based on what you heard that I could help with.
I have a question, which is, we've said that the students who are vaccinated don't, in 7, 12, don't need to wear a mask, and we haven't checked for vaccination. Since the goal is to keep as many students in the classrooms as possible, would it be possible for parents to volunteer if their child has received the Pfizer vaccine to share that information with the district and have their student remain unmasked?
So that happens already.
Okay.
So what happens is that, well, I should say, let's do the Pfizer vaccine part. When you're in close contact, and Jen, I think Jen Banco makes those calls mostly, she'll ask the family as she's determining where they fall on that flow chart, has your child been vaccinated? Right now, it's just, has your child been vaccinated, and would you share that information with us? Because if you do, we can make an accommodation.
Mhm.
Now the question will have to be, if it's over 16, have you been vaccinated, and would there be, which vaccine,
Mhm.
right? 16 and 17 only have access to Pfizer.
But what about preemptively in terms of sending students to school who have been vaccinated? Because one of the things I've heard from parents is, my child received the vaccine and so I would like them to attend school without a mask. Is there a way for them to show, similar to, we have vaccines that are required, the MMR, the vaccine, we need
Right.
certain dosages before 12th grade, and meningitis, and similar to that, is there a way for the parents to share that vaccination status with the district?
The only group of people, if we did like a hybrid of some sort, which might be hard to manage, you would have to be in the FDA approved cohort, because House Bill 244 is very specific. It has to be FDA approved.
Okay.
So even if you're vaccinated and you're under 16, we're not allowed to differentiate.
So it's just, so this would be an option for students who were vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine.
And 16 and over, because that's what FDA approved.
And 16.
So we could think about it. I'm not exactly sure how we would monitor that. Maybe that could be a mask exemption piece that we could talk about.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's the right thing. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, because what's confusing is that it has to be Pfizer right now, right? So let me just give you a scenario that I thought about driving back this weekend. I've had Moderna. If I'm a close contact and I don't get, my vaccination won't stand right now if Pfizer is the only one that we can differentiate on, right?
Right.
But I'm an adult that's been vaccinated with Moderna. This is where we still have some things to work out,
Yeah.
but that's the complication.
So
Mhm.
there's 2 different categories that we need to be, right? I mean, it's important. Our primary goal is to keep our students safe and in class, but also to keep our staff safe.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of parents aren't aware that one of the things that we no longer could do, there were a lot of things that, a lot of orders that enabled us to operate differently during COVID that no longer give us that ability. So when we talk about quarantining our students, it's a big risk, because if you are in high school and you have to stay home for 2 weeks, it's like you're just, your teacher's sending home worksheets, or for the most part, missing out on that classroom experience. And everyone can remember back to high school, if you miss a class, how impactful that can be. Same thing in all the grades. But so in having the conversation, I think we have to think about the safety of the staff and also the safety of the students.
And the gap in education.
And the gap in education. Yeah, that's, I mean, the quarantining part, I think, is just starting to hit parents. They realize like, oh, wow, if my child is masked, they don't have to quarantine.
Correct.
That seems to be very helpful in people overcoming what they perceived as a downside to the masking. But the other thing that I want to say is, as you continue to look at this and bring new information forward to us, whatever is recommended, I think we should be as specific as possible around what the metric is that will enable us to pivot back. We all know this has been a challenging time for all our families and the community. And I think it will be better received if we can say, we're continuing to follow the data that we have. We're continuing to do what's in the best interest of our students and staff. This is what we feel is necessary right now. Here's what we're looking for in a beacon to hopefully, remove this process and return to some sense of normalcy.
I agree. And hopefully too, some of the other vaccines will become FDA approved.
Yeah.
And maybe I have been hearing through the grapevine that the 5 and up should, for emergency purposes, should be available, which will be helpful. But again, because of the House bill, we're limited because we can't differentiate.
The majority of our students and staff though, so did the staff, when the district offered the vaccine, we offered Pfizer, right?
My understanding
I
is
have
both.
Moderna.
You have Moderna.
We had both.
Yeah.
We did have both.
The students received Pfizer.
That's, yeah,
Students can only receive
except
Pfizer.
maybe an 18-year-old, because an
Yeah.
18-year-old would have had access to many options, all 3 options, right? I think Johnson & Johnson was 18 and up.
Yeah, I just mean when they came to the school for the vaccine, Jen Banco would know specifically.
It was Moderna, the one that they did here at the staff. If you went to the ESC, there was 2 different dates. That one, I believe, is Pfizer.
So the staff has different stuff, but the
Yeah.
students, I think, all got.
I think Pfizer is still the only option for students because they're under 18, most of them.
Right. Okay.
So Pfizer
So
was
that
the only.
changes the equation a little bit.
Except for the fact that if you're 12 and up, you can get Pfizer vaccine, right? But only 16 and up is FDA approved. These are all the little
Right.
intricacies
so-
that cause. the
So any
barriers.
middle schooler that got it wouldn't be covered. We don't have any middle schoolers, I believe, that are over 16. So any middle schooler who received the vaccine would not, we couldn't, differentiate. And this is an Ohio public
House
school thing,
bill.
because this is Ohio's House made this
Mhm.
law. So this.
And
would-
maybe things will change. I mean, maybe there'll be some edits or some revisions, but it's not going to happen in 10 days,
Right.
in my opinion, for what it's worth. And October 13th is when everything will hit. Plus, we have some other things going on around us. And sometimes I just think it just unfortunately may not have hit here yet. So just to keep that in perspective.
Yeah, kind of speaking to that, I mean, what is the experience rate that, you've seen as you're looking at the data around us?
Around us, there, some of the schools that I mentioned have been hit. The one I can speak about probably is Solon, because they started the way we started. And prior to Labor Day, they had a significant flux of positive cases and quarantines. And so they made the shift to universal masking.
And has it been like in the general population or among a sports cohort or?
Well, they had their community spread numbers increased significantly. You can, if you go to the CDC website, I think it's the CDC, it might be the Ohio Department of Health, but any website that will get you there, you can enter the zip code and you can see the change. But it doesn't, it's hard because, for example, we check the zip code data at 2 o'clock every day. Because that's the only way we know it's constant, it's a time, we can see the flux. We haven't seen a big increase. I know that Solon zip code did, and that was one of the factors that triggered their move to universal masking.
Have we seen an increase in absences?
That one, we're trying to trend data. So here's the catch. 2020 is not a year to use as a marker year, right? I'm not even sure if you guys were in 5 days a week in September. So what we did was we looked at 2018 and 2019 attendance data, just overall attendance, right? If your goal is to keep kids in school, you also need to look at the big picture. How's our attendance? I don't have it exactly in front of me, so if I'm wrong, give me some grace. But I think that in 18 and 19, in the month of September, like the number of weeks we've had in school, if you will, we averaged about 12 absences. I think the numbers we were looking at were after Labor Day. And then in 2021, we were looking at 22 to 23. And I'm going to turn to Mike real quick. And am I anywhere close? Does that sound close? Okay, so double. But there are other factors. I mean, just think of, I know on the calls I've been on, it's not just COVID. We're hitting flu season. There's another, is it called an RV virus? RSV
Yeah.
respiratory that's really impacting kids right now. So those kinds of things, it's all, but I think the sick was that the indicator that we were talking, Mike, just sick only? So we've run some, Mike is obviously someone who sits on that team, so. Any other questions?
Just a comment. I mean, yes, nobody wants to wear a mask. This is what we feel we need to do at the present time to get over it. You do it for the good of the community. So I know you have the authority to pivot when you think we need to. And when we think we can pivot again in the other direction, we will do that.
And the one thing I know about the decisions that were made last year with the same team is taking a proactive approach. So the minute that we start to see anything flux, and a little bit, in all honesty, we are with the overall attendance and with some of the other recommendations and things. I think we also want to stay on the proactive side and not the reactive side. But I don't see anything to help us when that October 13th date hits. And I just want to start having the conversation and preparing. And preschool keeps me up at night a little bit, only because I have no other way to help those kids. And now they're back in session. So we have to be, I know the team's going to work through, but we have 2 more meetings tomorrow. I promise that if the outcome of that meeting is that we need to pivot early or what date, we'll get that communicated out to our families so that people can prepare. Remember that no matter what happens, we have a strong policy in place and there are exemptions. So if someone applies or needs to do an exemption, we'll work you through that process. Our principals are very well vetted in how to do those things. But I just didn't think, we hadn't talked about COVID for quite a while. I think we've talked about masking, or at least heard masking, but we've not been able to actually have an update. So I wanted to give everyone information.
Just one final question. Are either of you hearing anything about House Bill 244 being repealed before the 13th?
I've heard modifications possibly, but remember, the legislators are just starting to come back in session, and they have things like districting and some other things that are a little higher on the priority. But I do think it's a concern for all school districts, especially ones that aren't universal math. So stay
Yeah.
tuned, I guess, to that piece.
Thanks for that date.
Yeah, we have a legal update tomorrow, correct? That
Do that.
we're receiving a legal update tomorrow, I believe, so anything that comes out of that, certainly look forward to.
Gotcha. So we cannot control, or we can somewhat influence legislation, but we can't control it. The thing that we can control is our local incidence rate. So the best thing that we as a public can do is try to control our incidence rate.
Right. And masking is still a mitigation by the CDC. It's still, I mean, I know even in some areas in Ohio, they're requiring masks indoors, or I don't know if mandating is a safe word, requiring. The word advisory was new. I hadn't heard that one before. So, but those are definitely things to consider. The numbers are high, and just because they're not high right here, we also don't have, we leave chagrin, right? So things can happen, and I think we just need to know what, stay tuned to the data, stay connected, and continue to watch. And if we need to pivot, know that that's a team decision.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. The next section, public participation. I'll read this quickly. The purpose of the Board of Education meetings is for the board to conduct its business. Board meetings are held in public, but not public forums. The discussion of agenda items is intended to be among board members, not a discussion with the public. Public participation section of the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to address the board. Community members who contacted the superintendent in advance of the meeting may be provided an opportunity to speak first, of which we have one this evening.
We have another one now.
So that was, but this one's as of tonight, right? So we had one in advance.
Yep.
Okay. Public comment is limited to 30 minutes. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak. No person may speak twice until all who desire to speak have had the opportunity to do so. Remembering this is a formal and official meeting of the board, and what you say becomes part of the official meeting report. If your comment involves a problem with a student, employee, or board member, please do not address them by name. Keep in mind, we're in a school house and possibly in the presence of students. At this time, the primary role of the Board of Education is to listen and reflect upon your comments. Following your public comment, if you have specific questions, please email the superintendent at jennifer.pinzarski@chagrinschools.org. So I believe we have one person that notified ahead of time.
We do. First speaker would be Vince Nasa. I apologize. One of those is correct, I assume.
You're all correct. Thank you. My name is Vince Massa. Members of the board, parents. I live at 316 Whitetail Drive in South Russell. I've spoken here before. Thanks for the opportunity to speak again. I want to talk a little bit about critical race theory. I think America is on fire and under attack everywhere as never before, and we should be concerned, especially for our children. Outside our borders, China is rising. China's children in the urban areas rank #1 in mathematics, science, and reading on a consistent basis, while American children rank around 37th in the world. That should concern us. Inside our borders, critical race theories spread into our schools, our government, our military, and even our churches and sporting events creates, in my mind, one of the deadliest threats America has ever faced. Contrary to the indoctrination of our children under critical race theory, which teaches them to hate themselves, to hate each other, and to hate America, The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision under the civil rights movement of the 60s was to seek fulfillment of the American promise of freedom and equality while respecting America's founding values. Most Americans who embrace critical race theory, I believe, do so with good intentions. They sincerely believe they are fighting racism. But I believe the real danger of the real agenda of critical race theory is being driven by radical leftist intellectuals determined to tear down Western democracies like America from within. You're skeptical. You can't believe that. Very well. Let me quote Richard Delgado, a law professor and the leading proponent of critical race theory in America. He admits, and I quote, "Unlike traditional approaches to civil rights, which favor step-by-step progress, critical race theory calls into question the very foundations of the liberal order." And what he means by liberal order is the American founding principles. In other words, the only way to fix things is to tear it all down. Individual rights, equality before the law, our American Constitution, loyalty, hard work, achievements, and even mathematics are irredeemably racist and broken. So what do we do about it? First of all, parents, you vote for people who believe in America's founding principles and who believe in your children. And watch how your tax dollars are spent. Secondly, make it clear that you are responsible for educating your children about social justice and morality, and that you expect your schools to be responsible for educating your children in mathematics, science, reading, etc. Teach your children to strive for excellence, a common standard that challenges people of all backgrounds to achieve their potential.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, have courage to do this. Thank you.
Well,
It's okay, I just need,
it's not our policy to.
okay.
Okay, next up would be Lauren Miller.
No, but it's that we know on her.
I don't have a statement. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question about HB 244. So for instance, if there was a seventh grader who was vaccinated and they had a close contact at school, they would be able to keep going to school if they were asymptomatic and wearing a mask. Is that correct?
After October 13th, correct. Right now, the mask isn't a layer, right? Because they're vaccinated. Is that?
Right. So this actually happened to my 12-year-old. So he had a close contact at school. Because he was not symptomatic, he was allowed to keep going to school.
Correct.
Despite the contact, he did wear a mask inside.
Correct.
Okay, so would that change after October
Yes.
13th? So even though he's still vaccinated and everything else is the same, he would need to miss school for 2 weeks
If he did not have a
in,
mask.
in the absence of universal
Because we can't
masking?
differentiate
Right.
except for FDA approved, which right now, as of September 22nd,
Mhm.
is 16 and up for Pfizer.
Okay, so a situation in which he was allowed to stay in school previously would change to one where he would be
Correct.
required to quarantine. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's important to think through the masking policy.
I just want to say one thing, because I think it's important to continue to represent the hard work of our teachers and staff that's been done over the last decade, but especially the last 6 years in this district. So a lot of people may not be aware that academic excellence continues to be the priority in the Chagrin Falls School District and will remain the priority of the Chagrin Falls School District. But what I'm most excited to share is the success we've seen educating our children through changes in the classroom to achieve that. So for instance, the staff has spent an inordinate amount of time deconstructing assessments. They've changed the schedules in all the buildings so that students have access to intervention during the school day. Our students are very busy before and after school, and also might not necessarily want to be called out to be a student who needs intervention. When you make it available all day by having labs open in each of the department areas, And then by building it into the schedule so that every student has the same period of time free, they take advantage of it, it becomes normalized. And we've seen that in the performance of our students. And the way we've been measuring it as a board is to look at performance on the state report card year over year. So in the last, and the board has incented our superintendent and treasurer and the administration to achieve very specific goals. In the last 6 years, the district has, as reported by the state report card, grown in rankings from 25th in the state to 3rd in the state. In 2019, prior to COVID, which was the last time the tests were given, the high school was the #1 high school in the state of Ohio. Those are major accomplishments. But most importantly, those are our students doing a better job, getting a stronger education and learning. And most recently, US News and World Report, which ranks high schools, came out. And we've been progressively improving there as well. In the last 3 years, we've gone from ranking somewhere in the 600th in the nation to we broke 300 this year, which puts us in the top 1% of high schools nationwide. So we really need to make sure that we are selling and sharing the successes of our staff, students, and teachers who have accomplished all that, and the parents who have been supportive of the school district, because we've been on a very strong path towards academic achievement. And it's important that everyone knows that and that we continues to remain our focus. Should it be clapping for me? You should. I wish every teacher in the district were here to hear the claps, because that's where the applause should go.
And I just want to make sure, Lauren, it's not a chagrin change, right? Okay, I just want to make sure that that's understood. The chagrin change would be to go to masking, and it's because, correct. Unless they're symptomatic. There are, I don't want to say never.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
Nobody else? Ms. Brugel?
I do not have any other names.
Did I miss one?
Yeah,
Is that just the sign in? Yeah.
I think so.
Did we miss anybody? Is there someone else who signed in? Oh, all right. Thank you.
I apparently don't read directions as well as our students do. I'm not going to call anybody any names. I don't think that's appropriate here, and I hope we can get away from that. Question I have for people in the school is, have we talked to our high school and middle school students about these tough issues, diversity and equity, and how we handle COVID, and asked them what they thought? Everybody seems to speak for the students, the parents, the community, the schools. We teach our kids how to critically think, not to be confused with critical race theory, but we teach them critical thinking skills to look at data and arguments and not their feelings, but to make decisions. And I think they learn to do that really well. And I think it would be interesting for us to give our students a little bit of a say, because I don't think we always give them enough credit. Also, I just wanted to add that I think it's safe to say that there are no high schools in Ohio that teach critical race theory. If anybody knows different, I'd like to hear it. I spoke on this briefly at the last meeting and nobody's told me any different, but I think that's a red herring. There are no schools outside of graduate level programs that teach critical race theory. And I think we should probably stop talking about that. And maybe engage our students to see how they think we should handle looking at issues like diversity and equity. And that's all I have to say. Oh, also, I really appreciate the details on COVID. I think that's a good thing to have in the meeting, maybe every meeting, just to have some summaries so that we can do what our students are learning to do. Make decisions based on facts and data and arguments rather than feelings, because our feelings aren't always right. Thank you.
And Gary, since you didn't say your name.
Oh,
let's say
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. Gary Welch, I live on South Main Street.
All right.
Sorry
There might
about
be a
that.
few people that don't know you.
This isn't my day for following directions.
We appreciate your comment.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's all. Moving on to consent agenda items. If I could have a motion for consent agenda items 7A through 7V.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And Ms. Bruno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay, next, if I could have a motion for superintendent's recommendation 8A through 8D.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And Ms. Bruno, if you'd please take the roll again.
Did you want to cover anything, Dr. Pinzarski? Any discussion or anything?
Sure, I can share a little bit about Christina and David and then maybe just explain a little bit of C&D. Christina Dietz worked in various administration positions in hospital settings prior to coming to Chagrin. Christina served as an administrative assistant to the director of operations, the finance manager, and the senior department officer, and the chief of medical officers at Geauga Medical Center. She's always had the desire to work in a school system, and Chagrin is like a dream come true to her. So we're super excited to have Christina as a member of our team. David Knapper comes to our district with a bachelor's degree in psychology from Liberty University and recently enrolled in a graduate program with the goal of earning a master's degree and licensed to be a professional counselor. Prior to accepting the position, David has worked for nearly 2 decades as an hourly team lead at Walmart. David's excited to serve the Chagrin School District as a second shift custodian. And then items C and D are just, we need additional nursing services based on need. And so I just think that those are things that happen. You just have to assess what the time is. And so these are just 2 additional contracts with PSI.
Gotcha. Is PSI, just a question on those, is PSI our normal provider for those, or do we, vet different providers annually or every few years, or?
Well, one of these contracts is actually, I believe, for St. John's using their state auxiliary money. Am I trying to pull them both up? Am I correct in that?
I think those are in the consent.
PSI for our nursing services for years. And we also use them, a lot of this St. Joan of Arc
Right.
special services comes through PSI, which has to come through our district because, the state can't deal with them directly.
I'm just trying to
Right.
see if this actually is theirs.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking the question. I know they're our regular provider, but even if somebody's a regular provider, I'd still think that we would bid it out, or like evaluate the different providers every 3 years.
I
or
think they're
something
certainly
like that.
evaluated. It's not a required bid per se, like we would do with a construction
Right.
project.
Right.
But I do believe that they're reviewed, and school nursing is not quite the same as just going out for home health or something like that. So it's pretty specialized, but yeah, I do believe that there are searches done.
Okay. Just curious. I've never heard of another provider other than PSI. That's
Yeah.
why I asked. the
For us, I
question.
can't speak for St. John's, but we just approve their contracts because their state money flows through us. So we receive their money and then we cut checks for them,
Mhm.
but it's still their money.
Right. Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Brutno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay. Next, treasurer's recommendations. If I could have a motion for 9A and 9B.
So moved.
And second,
I'll second.
thank you. And Ms. Brudno?
Yes, two items tonight. One is donations. We have a donation of 49 boxes of gloves and 91 boxes of masks from the ESC of the Western Reserve. And then we are disposing of a bus that is going to Cardinal, where we purchase our other buses from. So those are the only items on my agenda tonight. Typically, I would bring your financial reports for the previous month. However, just given the time that we've been spending on other things, I have not gotten to those. This is, I believe, the second or third month in a row that these have gotten out a little bit later than I wanted. So I will bring those next month, I promise.
Gotcha. Just a quick question on that. I know you had a very high level of public requests, public documentation requests. Is that continuing? Is it subsiding?
Just a lot of duplicate requests at this point, so it's not necessarily pulling the documents together anymore because those are already items that have been provided to others. So it's really just kind of scanning in and sending out. And then a few items, one in particular that's kind of sitting out there right now, we're waiting on some redactions to be performed that have to be done by some professionals because it's beyond our expertise. So we're waiting on that. That's the only one right now that is outstanding. I do turn those around pretty quickly. But it certainly takes time. It is tapering off a little bit though.
Gotcha.
Actually, you've done a tremendous amount of work in the last couple of years too, building a new team and getting everyone up to speed and improving the way we account for our purchases and the way we do the way you present all the financial data. If you feel that you need support to help manage these requests, but none of us, I think, want your team getting burned out over this. So please feel free to bring
Thank you.
something to us.
Thank you. While we're on this topic too, I also want to point out that the auditor of state.
Sharon.
Are you
Said you did it now.
volunteering to come in and work
Just kidding.
tomorrow at about 9 a.m.? No, I also wanted to point out, while we're on the topic of transparency and public records requests, the auditor of state released their first report last week on their new system where they're rating transparency among governments. And I have an email here from them that says they audited last year 4,181 entities for public records compliance. Their email says more than 59% have achieved compliance, which to me means almost 41% were non-compliant. But also that 559 of those local governments received the highest level of awards, or the highest level of stars. I can tell you what the rating is. But they award stars based on your practices and how you handle public records requests. You can get up to 4 stars. We did receive the highest level there, and we received an award for that. So we are among the top 14% in all governments of the state, who, we're among the best at transparency. So I just wanted you guys to know that our staff does a great job. They, try to turn those around really quickly, and we acknowledge them very quickly, and we do respond completely. So I just thought that was a nice little feather in our cap that I wanted you all to be aware of. So very proud of my staff on that.
Thank you for keeping us in good shape. And also talking about states and audits, I assume the financial audit is getting underway too.
Right. So currently we're working on the conversion, which is also taking up a lot of our time because we have to provide all of the documents and things to the IPA firm. So they're working on the conversion. They will prepare the statements and then they'll be audited. So we refer to them as auditors, even though they're not really auditing anything yet. They're just compiling it for us. But yeah, that is underway.
Yeah.
It's taking up a lot of Jill's time.
Yeah, I do definitely want to not leave that. We do greatly appreciate the work your department does, because communicating to the public, when they have requests, is a large area of maintaining the trust in the school board and trust in the school system for the services we provide. So you're serving a very important function there.
Thank you. We've always been compliant. I mean, I want to make sure everyone understands that. The school has always been compliant, but this is the first year that the state implemented this new STARS rating system. So that's kind of neat when you scroll down and look through every single government, local government, townships, villages, cities, schools in the state, and you can see how many stars everyone got. And we're one of the 14% that got all 4.
That's great.
Very good. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Next, other business. Does anybody have any other business for this evening?
I will be representing the district at the day-long school law update done by Hebel and Wagner next Thursday, September 30th.
Thank you.
Take copious notes, please. I said, take copious notes.
Yes. And if there are extra packets, I'll be sure to grab them for you guys and highlight the best parts. How's that?
Awesome. All right. Anybody else?
I just have a question. Are you happy with the location? Are you happy with the sound? What do you think? There's no games.
How's
not
it
to worry About.
Sound is good.
Is this, what do you think? Stay here? Because I just want to find a consistent
Yeah,
space.
it's
that you
tough.
can still
Try and
do
keep it in the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's good.
Can everybody hear in the back?
Better.
I can hear better, all of us, than I could in the pack too. This is much better.
Yeah, I like this layout. I mean, you can see everybody. We're looking at each other, not out.
Yeah.
I like it. It's
You can
good
find
social
Mrs.
distancing. I mean, there's a lot of good things about it.
Mrs. Garvey comes back, I'll move to Ashley. Ashley and I can share a table.
Yeah.
That way we can keep everything.
You can move the podium over there and you can sit at the head.
Yeah. No, thank you. Really good.
Okay. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 6th at 6 PM back here in the high school library. Okay,
All
I could have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And Ms. Bruno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes. I couldn't hear my name.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you very much.